views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of alltalkradio.net.
Looking back at life as it's been before, holding on to things that might have been, knowing that this day will never come again, as my spirit's guiding me to a place where I am free to be all that I can be.
Welcome. That's usually Jane always says it twice. So welcome. Now we did it 4 times. Anyway, I'm Elena Risto. Welcome to Soul Chat, and this is
Vicki Claire.
Vicki Claire's sitting in today. We were going to have her on the show anyway, because we're going to talk about All Hallows Eve, or Halloween as we've come to know it in this country. So before we go on to that, Jane isn't here today because she is moving, for all of you that have gone through that process. And I think she thought she was going to be here, but I started telling her yesterday, you might want to stay with your boxes a little longer, so they got all the big stuff moved yesterday, and today it's all that little stuff, I hate moving.
I hate moving too.
Yeah, moving is just like, wow. In fact, the last time I moved, I said, I'm finally gotten to the place where I'm not going to move again unless they carry me out.
Good for you.
At least that was the plan at the time. So last week we talked about ghosts. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the show last week at all. You had your own thing going on.
Oh, I had my own moving thing going on.
Yeah, Vicki was the owner of Well of the Moon. And I was teaching down there. Jane was teaching down there, and Jane was doing psychic readings there, and you were doing some as well.
That's
lot,
correct.
Not some, a lot.
A lot.
And the decision was made, and a lot of people are sad about it, but we understand that sometimes that's just what you got to do.
Yeah, I had to close the business. It's always a business decision.
Yep.
Moving on to what's next.
Yeah. You got any insight as to what that other... I've heard North Dakota flying by,
Yeah, a little bit of insanity there. One more adventure before we get too old.
Yeah. Yep. So last week we were talking about ghosts, and we kind of did it that way because we knew we're coming up on Halloween. We thought it was a good show to have in front of the one that's we're going to do today. So what we basically talked about, and I would love your input on it if you've got anything additional, but from my point of view, from a shamanic point of view, and I know you come from that place as well, kind of from a little different turn than I do, but it's really ghosts are spirits that are stuck. A lot of times they're people that have passed on at some point, maybe a few thousand years ago. It could be that. But they're basically, for the most part, not all, because I've had to deal with someone in the work that I do that they're not people that died that got stuck. It's something else that we got to deal with. But for the most part, it's pretty much it's spirits that are on the other side that are trying to get our attention, one form or another. Some of them can be playful. Some of them can be kind of problematic. It just depends,
That's true.
Yeah. So I would be interested on your take on them, though.
Well, I have a slightly different take.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. That's what we wanted to get out. So.
Well, the way that I view the spirit world is that it is all around us, and that we are always surrounded by spirit.
Yeah, that's true.
That time is not linear. No. It is spiral, so that we are constantly intersecting with other time points. So therefore, there are times when all of us are aligned and attuned to the spirit presences, whether they're stuck or not stuck.
Right.
There's some part of their consciousness that remains,
right,
that we can contact. Now, there are those that do become problematic because they are bothering us for our attention. Most of the time, they just want acknowledgement, and you can live with them.
Right.
Unless they're feeding off of your life energy, then they gotta go.
Then they got to go. Yeah, that's when you and I come in.
Yes.
You know, yeah, and I agree with everything that you said. I think in the context we were talking as ghosts, as people think about it, you know, the
Right.
shows, the multi-million
Oh,
billion
yes.
dollar industry, is on the ones really that have become kind of problematic in a certain regard.
In a certain regard, I think that some of the ghosts on these shows that are supposedly problematic are really not problematic. It is
Right,
the
I would
people's
agree.
attitudes towards the spirit world that is problematic. They fear it because it is the unknown.
Right.
And so therefore they feel threatened even when there isn't a threat. Because I've lived in haunted houses, and I just tell the ghosts what the rules are, and if they don't abide by the rules, then they gotta go. If they abide by the rules, they
Yep.
can stay.
And one of the things that we came to at the end of the show was that for the most part, they really can't do anything to you. They can make things irritating. They
Yes.
can make things problematic, you know. If they become attached to you, if they come enmeshed with you, now you have a different situation because now we've opened up some of the things like depression, and people can feel suicidal, and
True.
but the actual ghosts themselves really can't say, I'm going to come over and kill that person. They can just plant suggestion. They can, you know, now I'm talking about spirits that are stuck. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about, you know, there's
Well,
other situations.
I've lived in a home where we had a spirit that was stuck, several spirits, in fact, and the one spirit did cause me to fall down a flight of stairs.
Right.
So now they can throw things at you depending on
Right.
how strong the manifestation is, place obstacles in your way. I wasn't paying attention. In a way, it was my fault that I fell because I wasn't paying attention.
But they're not going to pick up a baseball bat and hit you on the head.
No.
No, that's the point.
Mhm.
They can cause situations where if you're not paying attention, I mean, you're part of the issue that's going on there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no, we're pretty much in alignment on that. You know,
Yeah.
we were talking in the framework of Casper the Ghost.
Yes.
You know,
Well, Casper the Friendly Ghost, he
Casper
could hang
the
out.
Friendly Ghost. He could hang out. In fact, I had something, and somebody noticed it. I had a full moon ceremony at my house
Yes.
this last time, and somebody was there, was pretty aware, pretty highly intuitive, not really knowing what to do with it, and she kind of looked all of a sudden, and she said, "Is there somebody in that room?" And I said, "Well, kind of." I had noticed for about a week I would catch them on the periphery, out of my eye, and there would be this peeking around the edge, and
Right.
you know,
Well, yeah.
and they've moved on since then. So
Yeah, the veil between the worlds is very thin right now.
It is.
This is Hallows is one of the cross quarter days in the old world calendar.
So
and
this is probably a really good point
Yes.
to just kind of jump in and start at the beginning. So when did the Halloween as we know it, when did it originate and where?
As we know it, it actually originated in the British Isles in the Victorian era. This was a time when people's families became very, very important. And so they were looking for activities for children, group activities, where they would get together, many different families, and have little tea parties and things like that. And so they looked to their historical heritage and found Hallows, and then they turned it into a party and a celebration for children.
Now, what is Hallows? What is that?
Okay, Hallows, the word hallow means to make sacred.
Okay.
So Hallows is to make sacred, or the sacred ones in a way. And Een, the W-E-E-N, is a contraction of evening.
Yes. So it was an evening time. It was
Yes.
after sunset then?
After sunset.
Okay. So you said they looked historically, and what did you mean by that? How
To
did
their heritage.
To their heritage, which means they honored their ancestors, or what?
No.
I mean, I just, you know.
Yeah, and costumes and masks and all of that, of course, came into being during that era, also during the Victorian era. Previous to that, however, what they were looking to were the traditions around the harvest, traditions around attitudes about death.
And why is that, do you think? Because of the life cycle? Because we are going into the life cycle of the seasons?
I think that is part of it.
Okay.
The most difficult thing about the origins of Halloween is the lack of records.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the lack of a national identity among the Celtic tribes that lived in a good portion of Europe as well as the
British Isles.
British Isles, yes.
So, did it really start in Ireland?
Yes.
Okay. And
Now-
why is that?
Well, the Irish were a funny bunch and still
Yeah,
are.
so we get to talk about Jane now because,
Well, that's me too.
yeah. Oh, I'm surrounded. All right, okay.
Yes,
At least I
yes.
don't have one on each side of me. Okay.
Well, among the Irish tribes, there was Samhain.
Spelled S-O.
Nope, spelled Samhain.
Wow.
A good old Gaelic. You never
Yep.
know how to pronounce the words
Right.
properly.
It's kind of like the Norwegian things, like side that you and I
Yes.
said. Oh, we say it this way and they say it that way. you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Samhain. Now, this happened when the constellation Scorpio was 15 degrees above the horizon.
So
Not on October 31st.
No.
This could happen anywhere from mid-October to around the 11th of November.
Wow.
This year, the date is November 7th.
Okay.
Yes. But we have adopted the calendar date for convenience.
For marketing.
Yes. Now, there's some controversy as to whether Samhain means summer's end or November's eve.
Oh.
Nobody
okay.
knows for sure which is correct. The Irish tribes, they spoke more specifically about the wild hunt in some regions. Not all regions celebrated this.
Now, I have a friend
Mhm.
who actually it's a friend's significant other. I haven't actually met him yet. I'm about ready to get his book,
Right?
but he has been teaching wild hunt. He just got finished with one, and now they're up in Calgary, Canada, and they're getting ready to do a fire walk and do the dragon lines. Yeah.
Well, the wild hunt was when the doors of the other world opened and
Okay.
the fairy hosts came forth, and they were seen as the storm winds that began to blow for the winter. And so any strong wind, people were afraid because they didn't want, and this was during the Christian era, all right?
Okay.
Previous to the Christian era, a little bit different attitude. But during the Christian era, the wild hunt would come forth and people would stay at home and they would wear their clothing reversed, not costumes, but the clothing that they had because, you know, those folks, the common folk, didn't have the money for costumes.
Well, not only that, they weren't educated.
Exactly.
So and histories in those days was written by the winners, and it was written by the people who probably didn't do the fighting.
Very true.
You know.
Very true. So they would leave offerings for the ancestral dead. They would honor them, not fear them.
Right.
And it wasn't about devils and skeletons, although skulls were very popular because
Yeah.
they felt that the soul resided in the head. And this was the skull was also the head of wisdom, or the once and future king, if you're into the Arthurian legends.
Sure.
But it also represented ancestral wisdom.
So bring me. Let's kind of summarize it up to this point then. So at the end of harvest, okay, and when it was 15 degrees above the sun,
The horizon.
the horizon, when the sun or Scorpio,
Scorpio.
this constellation.
Yes.
Okay, that's when they considered Halloween or All Hallows
yes.
Eve or
Samhain,
whatever.
yeah.
Oh, okay, and so what was happening is they were honoring their ancestors.
That's part of it, yes.
Okay, and
then
what's the other part?
when the wild hunt came forth, the wild hunt's purpose was to gather up all those who had died since the previous Halloween. And they could sweep the living into it also. So this is part of the reason why the people feared to go out of doors.
Well, obviously we don't fear that because we were sending our kids out there with buckets.
And then from sunset of that date, so sunset on November 7th this year, until dawn the following morning,
Okay.
that would be considered Samhain.
So that was when the wild hunt would happen?
Yes, that's
That
correct.
was when the spirits would come from the other side?
Yes.
Or they would pick up the ones that had passed in that year?
Both are true, yes. Because the veil was open between the worlds,
I'm going to turn my chair a little
those
bit 'cause
that
my
had
back's starting to hurt.
previously passed
Uh-huh.
could
Am I still
communicate.
in camera here?
Could
Oh,
communicate.
I gotta get cozy here. Okay. Okay.
Could communicate
Right there?
with
Okay.
could communicate with the living.
Okay.
And then they would be sweeping up those who had passed away, especially those that had been died by violence and didn't know that they were dead. Of course, those that died in peace went on a little bit more peacefully.
Right.
But they went out and gathered up, and they were the storm winds again that blew. So this is how you knew that the wild hunt was there. It's because the wind was blowing. The air, the storms were moving and across the land.
So Hallows was then really about cleaning up the spirits that were left behind in the last year.
That's part of it, yes.
That's part of it. And so there was a fear that they would take the living with them.
That's correct.
I see.
Yes.
So how did the witches and how did all of that, how did that come into being? Where did it turn?
Oh, sadly it turned when overlaying religious culture came into being, specifically Christianity. When they turned it in, anything that wasn't Christianity became evil.
Okay.
And so they turned it into devils and witches, ugly witches.
So they basically, you're saying
they demonized.
They demonized in order to, and I'm always talking about how certain texts from that time. Now, what year are we talking about when this probably happened, would you say?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
It would have happened fairly early because
fairly early meaning before Jesus was born in the Christian religion, or was it AD, BC? Was it?
This would have been AD.
AD, okay.
Yeah, which actually today's scholars are changing that BC and AD to before the Common Era and Common Era CE.
Okay.
So this would have been Common Era.
Boy, that's going to confuse people. We've been living with BC and AD and all those.
But it doesn't apply across the world.
It doesn't. It doesn't. It's kind of like metric and inches and all of that stuff.
But it would have happened fairly early. I think just from my studies alone, when the Roman Church came in and abolished some of the practices of the Irish Christian priesthood is probably when this started.
So would we say that's probably in like 1100 and 1000?
No, it would have been much earlier than that.
So we're talking just a couple hundred years after whenever the current AD/BC thing started.
Yeah, I don't have the exact date in my head. I do know that when Patrick came in, he forced the Irish clergy to become celibate, whereas in the past they were married couples, and that the position was hereditary. So the oldest son would take over the clergy position of the father.
So it really kind of followed a tribal kind of thing.
In some ways, yes.
A tribal structure.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And when Patrick came in and abolished those practices and forced celibacy on the Irish clergy, and
I bet that wasn't a happy day.
Oh no, it was not. This is when the Roman Church also took over the lands that had previously been hereditary inheritances, because it was passing from father to son.
Now, I'm just going to throw a little side note in here that doesn't have anything to do with Halloween, but I found out just not that many years ago that my last name is Risto.
Right.
But in Finland, they had a practice where you took on the name of the farm, which played havoc with any kind of genealogy things.
Yes.
So that's interesting. So I just think that's an interesting side note that it was tied to the land.
Well, in Scotland, it's very much the same too.
Yeah.
For example, I have a friend whose name is Gallimore, and it means plain of the foreigners. And it was referring to the land outside of Dublin where the Saxons were living and the Vikings.
Yeah.
And so it referred, even in Scotland, my maiden name is Singleton, which means dweller in the burnt out clearing.
Oh, that's pretty clear. That's pretty clear.
Yeah.
So interesting. So Patrick, is that St. Patrick?
St. Patrick,
And
yes.
so what is it about St. Patty's Day? That's a whole nother show, but can you just say what's that got to do with anything?
Well, again, it's become a party and much more than it ever was.
But is that Irish as well? It is,
Yes, it
isn't it?
is. Yes, it is.
So the Irish, you guys really did yeah, you liked conflict, right?
It's been that way for thousands of years in Ireland.
Yeah.
If you weren't fighting with your neighbors, you were fighting with the church, or you were
Right.
fighting with the British, Angles and Saxons, the Vikings, you name it. They fought with them.
So in your research then, it was when the Roman Catholic Church came in and started to control the Irish. Is that what
That's
you're talking
correct.
about? Okay.
Mhm.
And
They had actually accepted Christianity fairly easily because it fell in line easily with the Druid
yeah,
beliefs.
I mean,
Yes,
that's
and
why I tell people whenever I'm teaching, it's why I tell people, shamanism, spiritualism, and
Right.
will work with any religion if you're
True.
open to the spirit.
right. It's practices. It's not a religion.
It's right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Same with the witchcraft. Witchcraft are practices, not a religion.
right. But because things were demonized, and we started Target, and we started Walmart, and we started, we have this thing called the American way.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's not necessarily bad.
Well, no, if you're trying to get off sugar like I am, though, it's not a good thing. Especially this time of year. Yeah, Cherry's over here going, oh. So it started in Ireland, something after AD, and it was really the Roman Catholic, the organized religion coming in and...
Well, we don't know what the practices were before the Christian era. We only have little snippets that were preserved actually by Irish clergy, who has snuck it into their writings and trying to preserve the lore of their people.
So do you think, because I've heard so many people say that in order to control things, the church adopted some of the pagan customs
That's correct.
to control the people. So you're saying also that it's possible that the Irish clergy, as part of the process in order to save things, snuck those in?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And part of the adoption of the practices of the old pagan ways,
Mhm.
part of it I believe was to control the people,
Mhm.
but I also believe it was also to attract them to the churches
Mhm.
by preserving the holidays that they were used to observing. And
Okay.
so that made it familiar, and so it would bring the people in. Just like adding in the Virgin Mary,
Mhm.
adding in a goddess figurine, because the women were not coming to church, and of course if the women didn't come to church, the men weren't going to go to church.
Kind of
Uh,
like today, huh?
Yeah. And so they added in the Virgin Mary for the women to pray to as a mother figure, and so that the women would come to church also. Because the veneration of the Virgin Mary actually was added on late in Christianity, as far as when did it start, when did it get
Oh,
rolling.
really?
Yes.
So when
Again, in those early, AD, CE, whatever
and
you want
things
to...
didn't happen fast.
No.
They didn't vote on it and say tomorrow.
No.
I mean, this was like over time.
Over hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years,
Yes.
yeah.
Because
Very
they didn't
interesting.
have instantaneous communication like we do today.
No,
You know,
no,
I've-
they didn't.
Some of the people that have been my teachers have pointed out some interesting facts about information traveling and whether practices were common or not, is that with as little distance as 3 miles, language would evolve so
Yeah.
that village A and village B that were 3 miles apart could not communicate with each other because the language evolved so much that even though one god name or goddess name was this and there was a similar word in the other language for a god or goddess figure, they were considered to be separate entities even though they sounded similar,
Yeah.
with just as little as 3 miles.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, I lived, when I grew up in a rural area, I lived about 5 miles from town.
Yes.
And if there hadn't been a car, this was a all-day affair.
Right.
And you needed to get back before dark, not because of what might scare you, but because there were nighttime animals that were predators that
Yes.
needed to be, that was one way to protect yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Things were out there going to eat you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, it translated over into a Halloween kind of thing too. Okay, so
I got a story for you.
no, I bet. So when did it all just? I just kind of got to watch the time here. This is really interesting. So when did it all turn into this party? When
in the Victorian era, when they were looking for activities for children, same thing happened with the fairy tales.
Okay.
Because what they did is they stripped the fairy peoples of their sensuality
Mm-hmm.
and even somewhat of their gender, made them very gender neutral looking.
Mm-hmm.
Prepubescent boys and girls, in order to make them safe and acceptable to turn into children's stories, and to shrink them into these cutesy winged flower fairies, again, to take their power away, because in the Celtic mythology they were very powerful beings.
They still are.
They still are, and more commonly human size or larger.
Mm-hmm.
They could take on any form because they're not restricted to form as we are.
I always thought it was interesting in the Lord of the Rings,
Right.
and the movies, that the Elvish people
Yes.
were tall.
Yes,
Really, they
yes.
were very tall, and I thought, and I often wondered about Tolkien. Of course, he was a literary genius or master.
And he was actually quite the historian too.
Yeah.
The practices that he and the customs that he brought forth of the characters in his books were quite accurate historically.
Really.
Yes.
Wow.
Mhm.
Now you trained with. I've heard you talk about him, Orion.
Orion Foxwood.
And where is he from? And he comes to town occasionally,
Yes,
right?
he does.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Orion is from Virginia, up
Mhm.
in the hills, Winchester, Virginia in particular. Currently, he's living in Maryland, but he travels around the world actually and teaches fairy seership, which is a shamanic practice.
And it's fairy seership, and it's spelled F-A-E, right?
Faerie.
Okay.
Fairy seership.
Seer is S-E-E-R.
That's
which
correct.
it's a divination term.
It is a divination term, but it is also seeing the truth of things.
Yes.
And this is where we work on the root of people as well as working with the roots of plants.
Mhm.
This is root doctoring. It's intermingled somewhat with the Southern conjure and hoodoo traditions as well.
So, and that's when you fall into the plant medicine, what we refer to as plant
Yes.
medicine.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Part of it, but it's the same function
Mhm.
as the shaman.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because
Uh,
shamanism itself is strictly, when you take all of the different cultures out of it, it's all about everything has a spirit. We're all connected. When we forget who we are and we forget our connection to that living spirit, that's when we start having problems.
Correct.
And then from there you start adding on the different iterations of what's going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we with the same kinds of customs with spiritual cleansing, exorcisms, communicating with the spirits to find out what the root problems are, whether it be physical, emotional, or spiritual,
It's
or
very
all three.
very nature based.
Oh, very nature
Very
based.
nature-based.
Yes, it's very important to be in tune with the land that you live
Right.
on. Get to know the plants, the dirt. What's in the dirt?
Right.
All
One
of
of
that.
the practices that that I teach people. I don't know if you ever sat in when I was doing it. You sat in some of my circles. Yeah, one rolls into another. You can't remember
Yes.
who was where. One of the things that we can do, and I suggest to people if they move into town. Sometimes I'll get somebody who says, "I just moved in from somewhere,
Right.
and I'm really lost, and I feel really alone, and I just don't feel like I don't feel like I'm here." Is I will I will take them on a journey to the spirit of the land
Yes.
where they are,
Yes.
which is you would probably have the same kind
Oh
of
yeah.
ritual,
Yeah.
and ask that spirit, what is it that this person can do
Right.
that's going to make them feel at home?
Yes.
What can they do?
Well, the dirt is
Yep.
actually the dust, the bones, and the
Right.
blood and the skin of the ancestral dead. And when we tune into that, we can listen to that spirit of place and become connected.
That's right. And it's not ancestral dead, not just meaning bodies, human bodies. We're talking about the ancestral dead of the trees, of the everything.
every
Everything
living thing.
By every living thing.
Yes.
It's interesting because my mother, who is currently in the process of passing, who's 96 and in dementia and, lived a very long life, a very full life. I remember when she was in her early 70s, and she loved watching birds, and she's Scandinavian. And one day she looked at me and she said, I just figured something out the other day. And I said, really? Like she had never done that before. And she said, I just figured out that the dirt is made of everything that went before. And and it was stunning. It was like I heard the air just get still. I knew spirit was in the room. I didn't know what it was at that time.
Right.
But I noticed the difference, and I thought, isn't that interesting? Because she always loved going out. And you could count on certain days in the spring when she would be out there on her knees, planting geraniums and doing
Right.
whatever, you know, so.
Now, interesting Irish practice about the ancestral dead. And I've read this several times in different books that I've studied, is when someone passes away, the family will keep articles of clothing of, you know, Uncle Jim. Okay, and so we have Uncle Jim's coveralls, and so Bob is out in the garden wearing Uncle Jim's coveralls, and Bob is talking up a storm, and so a passerby says, "Well, who are you talking to there, Bob?" And he says, "Well, Uncle Jim." Because Uncle Jim is still there because
still there.
he's got his coveralls, so he's still
Right.
there.
Right.
So the Irish don't believe that the ancestral dead go away. They're still available for us to
Sure.
talk to through connection with the articles that they have owned, but
You kn-
also in our blood, more importantly.
Oh, yeah. And you've heard my invocation.
Yes.
When I do it, it is, you know, if you're willing to listen, the whispers of your ancestors is coming to you through your blood.
Yes.
They're coming through your DNA, but you have to be willing to listen.
Yes.
You know, that's the big thing.
Yes.
So we got a little off there, but very interesting. So at some point in the Victorian era, somebody decided they wanted games for children.
Yes.
So they decided to bring the ancestors through.
Well, not the ancestors, but the witches and the skeletons and the you know, harvest practices like bobbing for apples.
Because it looked like fun. They read about it. It
Yeah.
had happened in the past, or they'd heard
The-
about
well,
it.
it was harvest practices like bobbing for apples. You know, this
Okay.
was something people would do at harvest gatherings to entertain the children. The witches and skeletons and ghosts and stuff, that was from where, you know, they turned it into something fun, scary. Where it had been demonized, so they took it and turned it into something fun for children. Again, stripping it of that horror and making it safe for children.
When did the candy come into it?
Well, you know, people made things by hand then. You know,
yeah,
or they
okay.
went to the confectioner if you were wealthy, but you made your own candies, you made your own sweets. So there would have been cakes and candies and pies and all of that sort of stuff at the parties for children.
Wow.
Hmm.
Interesting. And
Yes.
people, so what is it about people loving to be scared? What is that?
I
Because I
don't
know people
know.
that just love that. Because I can't deal with the scary movies.
Right.
Not because of the visual thing that's going to happen. I can't deal with the music. I can't deal with everything that they have for the build-up.
Right.
So I hear it coming, and by the time the actual event happens on, I'm already toasted.
I
just
don't
can't deal
know. I
with the
think
stress.
I you know, my personal opinion is that we just enjoy being scared, you know, and testing out those fight or flight responses in ourselves. It's maybe even the adrenaline surge from being scared, you know, that we're addicted
it
to.
could be because some of us create drama in our life one way or the other.
Yeah,
We
one way
like
or the
drama.
other.
We got to have that versatility,
Yeah.
you know, that it gets it going.
Yeah, you know, I don't like the slasher gasher movies, you know.
Yeah, they
all
don't
the-
do anything
They
for
don't do
me. It's
anything for
kind of
me, but I like the good psychological mind, you know what.
So did you see The Conjuring?
No, I have not.
Yeah, you might want to watch that. I kind of got drugged to it by a friend of mine who came into town and said, "We're going to see this," and I went, "Really, seriously?" And he goes, "Yep, we're going." I was fascinated because it's the couple that was the Amityville Horror. You know that
Oh,
couple.
yes,
The
yes.
couple had
Mm-hmm.
their archives. I don't know if they're both gone or not. One of them is gone for sure, but they've opened up their archives of all the years that they did
Wow.
working with clearing houses and,
Right.
and all of that. And so this is another piece
Right.
of the story.
Mm,
So I was fascinated. You know,
right.
he was jumping like 3 feet. And I'm going, look at that. Well, how about? I mean, I'm now looking at it as a grown-up through doing the spiritual work that I do.
Right.
Going, wow, this is really something. And of course, right now they release. This has become a time not only to buy candy, but it's the time they deliver all these monster movies. Right
Oh
now.
yeah. Well, there's been a lot of hype built up around it. You know, for the ancestors in the pre-Christian era, people would have honored their ancestors as far as we know. We are not 100% positive, but we do know that the the tradition of honoring the ancestors has come from the past into the future. Where
Okay,
did it?
talk more about that.
Well, I'm sure in the cultures that you're familiar with as shamanic type of cultures, there's always some sort of ancestor veneration that goes on.
Right, and the part that I'm familiar with is you want the door closed, not just for the people that are behind, but for the person that has crossed over. You want that door to be closed for them so they understand that this reality is not part of their being anymore.
True, but
It's not that they can't come back. It's
Mhm.
not that, but I mean, this is so that they don't do things like get enmeshed with people. This is so
Right.
they don't. It's for that.
yes, you don't want them to feed off of your life energy.
Right.
Yes.
Right. You
Yes.
don't want them to even
Mhm.
shadow you, because that's and shadowing in the terminology that I'm familiar with is there's a person that's with you all the time, shadowing you all the time, and so there isn't a direct connection, but it can cause certain things. It's not as bad as if they were feeding off your lifeblood.
Right. Well, I would, and I'm sure you do this too, as a case by case
Right.
issue.
Right.
Uh,
There isn't a this isn't meant as a general statement. I'm
Right.
just saying this is
Yeah.
what I'm familiar with.
Right. Ancestor veneration is where we honor our ancestors for everything that we are,
Mm-hmm.
because in essence they created us.
Mm-hmm.
It is through all of their bloodlines and the memories
That we exist.
that we exist, and that we look the way that we do, that we sound the way that we do. You know, they in essence are our creators,
Mhm.
and so we honor them for that, for all that they have passed to us. However, we do not accept their destiny.
No, that is the thing of this reality. Is our
yes.
free will.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we are here to learn from the things that we are experiencing now, and instead of taking on the destiny of our ancestors.
So that's where we get into the curse work.
Yes.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens.
Yes.
It does go through. Sometimes I just had a case not long ago where this woman came into this life to finish out that curse, to release her ancestors from that curse. It was really interesting the way it came about. I'd never had that kind of experience before.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was. It was a woman that was born from the Middle East.
Ah.
And I'm on this beach. Here's this Finnish person like I am standing on a beach, and I look around and there's 13 women in burqas now. 13 is a magic number,
Yes.
right? So, and they're all looking at me, and I totally understood that they were there to honor this woman
Right.
because she was here to help them heal.
Right.
So when you remove something like that, or when we do any healing of our own in this lifetime, whether there's a curse on us or anything, it goes back generationally because there isn't this linear time thing.
Right.
Right.
Right. Well, in my ancestor practices, I pray for my ancestors, because when we pray for our ancestors, we are affecting the whole time continuum.
Right.
The
Same
past, the present, and the future. I pray that they will find the happiness and the joy that they were looking for in this life, that their journeys through the other worlds will be easy, that they will cross from the bank of sorrows through the river of blood to be washed, and then go on to the bank of song as they prepare to go into the future.
Which is-
and
Yeah, it sounds like that's the process when people are having near-death experiences and they're seeing
Yes.
the light, and they're
Yes.
seeing, and there's and this. It's always fascinating to me that they see the ones that actually get there, but somebody comes and talks to them
Yes.
and tells them,
not your time.
"Not your time. You don't want to do this yet."
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
But we pray that their transition is easy, and that they will come to the bank of song,
Mhm.
which is a bank of recreation,
Mhm.
and that as they journey
No,
into the
this is
future.
this is the
My
your
ancestral
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 background,
practices.
yeah.
Yes, similar to most ancestral practices.
Mhm. There's a flavor in there in all of them that there's a common thread.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So a common thread is honoring the ancestors, praying for their easy transition, praying that the issues of their lives will be resolved in the other world.
So, do you think these practices happened on Hallows Eve?
Yes, I do believe that some of them did.
Okay.
Now, my ancestral practices, I don't do just once a year. I
Right.
do every week.
Right.
I give offerings. I give life essence to them with water and with flame. Occasionally, a favorite food or beverage. coffee, if they smoked, give them a cigarette, whatever it was.
Oh, let me tell you, when we had to log the farm, one of the things that the spirits gave me to do, because it was a really difficult decision, my parents' farm,
Right,
for financial reasons, we had to do that.
right.
I journeyed to and met this little old man that was
Mhm.
standing under this big fir tree by a house, and we
Yeah.
still own the house. And he said, "Come with me," and he's walking me out through the field, and this is in the journey, and he says, "Now just stand here." And then all of a sudden, all of these fairy folk came out, and they were saying, "Well, what if we got you the money? Could you save the trees if we got you the money?" I said, "We're down to a couple of weeks. If you can do it, that's great, but we got to set this up and let it go." So one of the things they wanted me to do was I had to write them a song, and I had to my brother was laughing at me because I'm out there with a bottle of vodka pouring along the edge of the field, doing whatever, and I had heard, don't agree to something and then don't do it.
Exactly.
Right. And I had that experience because about a month later, I couldn't find anything. I was losing car keys. I was losing anything little in my hand was gone.
Yep.
Right. And finally I said, "What in the heck is going on here?" And I went on a journey, and all of a sudden here popped up these beings again, and they said, "So, did you write the song?" And it was like, "No." So I wrote the song, and it got better. I
Yes.
started finding things
Yes.
again, And there's many stories of that.
Yeah, well,
so-
I also do house spirits, the brownies.
Oh, the brownies. Yeah, they're
Yes.
fun.
Yes, give offerings to them, so they get a bit of the whiskey. And since we don't drink milk, I give them butter as their cream
Mm-hmm.
and honey.
Mm-hmm.
Put it in a cupboard that we don't use very often, a forgotten place in the house. And so
Do you ever find it gone? Other than maybe from evaporation? I mean, have you ever had an experience like that?
Yeah,
Have you?
yes.
It's those things, and I think that people can be spooked by that.
Yes, that it's
because
real.
It's real, Well, it's not real unless it's here. you
Right.
know. So,
Yeah, that materialism that says prove it,
yeah,
and it must be something tangible.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Well, you and I both don't.
No.
I mean, no.
I've just had too many interesting
Yeah.
things happen in response to my practices to say it's not real. It is real. And, I've had a cup of coffee offered to spirit disappear overnight. And yeah, the humidity is low here and things evaporate fast, but
Quickly?
not that fast.
Not that fast. No. Especially if it's not in the hottest July and August.
Exactly, and it's in the house in the air conditioning.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that freaks people out.
Yes.
And I think I never used to get that freaked by it. Did you ever get freaked by that, Jerry?
I've been around it so much.
Yeah, that's the deal. I mean, after a while, you just go, okay, this is part of it.
Yes.
It is part of it.
It's always been real to me.
Yeah. It always has been real to me, too. So we're down to the last, how many minutes have we got? A few minutes here? Okay. So let's just kind of wrap this up.
Right.
So it started a long time ago.
Long time
A
ago.
long time ago in Ireland.
Yes.
And it was a practice that they believed on a certain day, when a certain constellation was at the right point in the right month, that the winds blew, and that was a sign that the spirit world doors were opening.
Yes.
Okay, coming in and cleaning up,
Cleaning
taking
up.
the spirits that were left behind after they'd passed
Yes.
in the last year.
Yes.
Okay, and so the fear became that the living would go with them if they weren't careful.
That's correct.
Okay, and then fast forward to the Victorian era,
Turned it into a party.
entered it into some party. Yeah,
For kids.
Yeah, and so it's really sad because like so many practices and rituals that were honored at one time that had a spiritual, I don't want to say goodness, but there was a higher spiritual intent,
Yes.
have come down to some kind of materialism.
Yes.
We've forgotten
Yes.
the true meaning of what
Yes.
it is.
Yes. And then of course when it came to America, us Americans in our great melting pot here
Oh,
turned
boy.
it into a big party for
A big
grown-ups
party.
too.
A big party at Target is what they're
Yeah, there you go.
whatever. So if there was one thing you could give people if they were interested on, now you say this year it's on
November
November
7th.
7th.
November 7th.
So if they were interested in honoring something like that,
Right.
if they wanted to get a hold of you, You're going to be teaching, right?
Yes, I will be teaching.
Up at Scarlet Dragonfly?
Yes, Scarlet Dragonfly
Okay.
Mystical Spa, which is 2620 Regatta Drive, Suite 120.
Okay. And if they wanted to get a hold of you,
They could reach me at 702-401-0197 or owner at wellofthemoon.com.
that's still alive.
That's still alive.
That's
Yes.
good. That's good. So, if there was one thing they could do on November 7th,
Yes,
that would be like an old way.
right.
What could it be that they would do?
Well, put out a bowl of water,
Mm-hmm.
light a white candle,
Mm-hmm.
and say a prayer for those that you love that have passed on,
Okay.
whether they are ancestors of blood or of spirit.
I just got goosebumps when you
your
said that.
yeah, your friends, your spiritual guides and mentors, your pets. You can honor
Everything.
them and pray for them that they will be blessed in the other worlds.
Great. All Hallows Eve.
Yes.
Terrific. I'm Elena Risto, and you can catch me online at shamanicsong.com or elenaristohealer.com. Join our Facebook page and like us, and we're going to be we're pretty soon going to have all the shows in one place so you can go and watch them. You can have a soul chat marathon, you know. Anyway, have a great week. Happy Halloween. Happy All Hallows Eve, and we'll be back next week. Have a great week. Thanks so much for listening. See you.
Looking back at life as it's been.